Hello and welcome to this session. Today we are going to have a conversation on some of the major thematic concerns with regard to the first 4 weeks of subject matter. And today I have with me Ms. Sanjana and Mr. Akash, who are all MA students at IIT Madras. I hope you will have an enjoyable time watching this conversation. Hello, guys.
Hi, ma'am.
So I wanted to explore this idea of themes as a kind of a conceptual framework across the 4 texts that we studied on this course. So gender seems to keep coming up as a major obsession or preoccupation on the part of the writers, be it male or female. So how do we approach this big category, gender, in relation to some of the texts?
Yeah, I was actually looking at gender like throughout the different stories. Like for example, in Kabuliwala, the way the mother is portrayed, or even Minnie, for example, how she's portrayed, and it was like mother is very marginal. She doesn't really have a role that she plays throughout the story, and even wherever she is portrayed, she's seen as over nagging or bragging. So what can we like understand from that?
Yeah. What do you think, Akash?
Yes, ma'am. So the one story out of all these 4 where the protagonists are female is Summer Vacation. And Summer Vacation has very strong female characters.
Yes.
The character of Muthasi, albeit she is very traditional in her approach towards life and everything, but she is a very strong female character. She is the head of the household.
Yes.
So, and that keeps coming up. But in the flood, for example, there's a marginalization, and there is no female character that has been talked about.
Yeah, quite right. So, and if we look at Karma, we have Lakshmi, the really fat and fair Lakshmi, who's again in the fringes, but who kind of comes up with a whip in a symbolic way towards the close of the novel, right? So, I'll begin with Kabuliwala, where we have a female character who is kind of towing the gender stereotype. She's naturally timid. I mean, that's the conversation we were having before this recording. So we have the artist, the writer, the first person narrator describing the wife for the benefit of the readers here. So she's naturally timid, she's naturally suspicious, right? And she doesn't have a kindly disposition towards the stranger. So that gender stereotype is played out really nicely, to put it ironically, in that story. But on the other hand, if you look at the flood, we just have this pregnant wife, we have the 4 children. So she again does what's her designated role in life, which is reproduce, and she does that. She has 4 children, 5th children is on the way, and she's passive. We don't hear her talk at all, right?
Definitely.
So that's there, and the total contrast to this is obviously the Summer Vacation. So we have a matriarch there, the overbearing matriarch. So can we explore more about this figure?
Yeah.
Definitely. So ma'am, in Summer Vacation, despite the fact that the protagonists are both females, there is this importance of motherhood that is brought by this minor character called Bharati, and she uses a hyperbole to point out the fact that Ammu hasn't grown up in the care of a mother. So what do you think of that?
Yeah. I mean, I think Kamala Das really hates or dislikes this exaggerated cliche of motherhood being like moonlight. You cannot do without one or the other. So as soon as she kind of voices out that cliche, we can see Mutashi getting up, very annoyed, and she removes Ammu from that space of gossip on the part of the village women, and she comes up with an excuse saying, my servant is really lazy, I need to go check in on him. And then very, very interestingly, she doesn't allow Ammu to come into contact with these other women for the second time, right? She says that, can I have my tea with the other women in Tekini? And she says no, and it's a curt no. And we can kind of read into that no and see that she's trying to protect this child from the harsh words or the cruelty of these gossips. But again, what is attacked there is the exaggerated notions of motherhood. And in fact, for Amu, Mutashi herself is like a mother, who's very protective, who's very caring, and she is very, very in control of that situation, contrary to the other mothers that we see, right? So we have a really strong figure, and that has something to do with the tradition of Kerala, right? Which has these matriarchal households, and especially we have this Naya community and this huge house which is run by this female figure. So we have that power dynamics neatly played out, and she's the boss over everybody, from the driver to the steward to the servant figure. Everybody, kind of toes her line. So that's a very interesting contrast that we have, and that has connections to the socio-economic traditions of a particular region, unlike the others that we come across.
Definitely so, ma'am.
Yeah.
But this particular statement on motherhood, what relevance do you think it has, even in the contemporary Indian society, where the tradition keeps basically keeps emphasizing the importance of motherhood and the independent women?
Yeah.
It's just a conflict that's present still about the motherhood is still emphasized as the most important pinnacle of being a woman.
Yeah.
But while Kamala Das is trying to counter that.
Yes, quite right. I think this notion of glorifying a particular role in the family has a negative dividends for the person who is being glorified, right? She will have to stick to that aura. She will have to carry out all the duties and all the responsibilities attached to that particular, role, and she would obviously be losing out on other activities which are there in the public sphere. So that is there, and maybe that's why, maybe interestingly, Kamala Das removes that mother figure from that narrative itself. She's dead, one way she's an absent figure, the other way it's necessary to make this child grow up more independently, know more about the realities of life very quickly. So Amu is the beneficiary, as well as she's losing out, of course. Growing up motherless is very difficult, but she will also grow up in a very, very mature way as well.
Also about the two female figures of both Amu and Mutashi. So we could see Amu as Mutashi the current matriarch, and Amu possibly the next matriarch who would take over, and we see Achyutan here trying to be favorable to both Mutashi and as well as Amu, trying to gain both their favors.
Yes, absolutely. Did you notice that?
Yes.
I mean, he makes like these, he has these sly glances, right, towards her, and she doesn't like that. She wants to, be on the side of her grandmother because she has her loyalties there, and at the same time, she doesn't want to be too harsh to him, which is why she somehow puts physical distance between the two of them. She goes and sits on the steps that leads out of the kitchen, right? So we can see that physical distancing happening there. At the same time, she doesn't want to be too harsh towards him, which is why she changes the topic. So you can see this really young child, being very, very diplomatic in the way she handles the people around her. So which is why I made that earlier comment about how this motherless girl grows up really fast, and she is kind of resembling her grandmother in some ways. Maybe not the harsher side of it, but the more diplomatic side of it comes up. So what do you make of this other two set of female characters, Naniamma and Ammani? She's a very, very interesting figure, and some of the interesting details that come out is the ring that she wears, right? This girl, Amu, sees her torn blouse, the ragged clothes, and she also notices that intricate ring, and she says she's fortunate to be wearing that ring, and that ring is attractive, right? So we have this woman here who's very poor, but she also has these aesthetic tastes, and that's becoming evident there in the jewelry that she wears. And the other thing is the nurturing attitude that she has towards her own daughter. Even while they're standing together, she's caressing the hair of her little daughter, and she kind of sweeps the floor with her feet. She clears the floor. She spreads the mundu for the both of them. You can notice these tiny details that kind of lays bare compare, the psyche of these two, this particular woman who wants the best for her child in these straitened circumstances, right? And that brings out the pathos. And this woman, Mutashi, is really harsh, isn't it? She says, you can't come to me every other day and make me give you a job. And she takes that very passively. She keeps smiling. And that's the weapon for her. It's like a blocking technique. No matter how harsh you are, I'll just smile and take it because I have to get the food. So all these become really, really evident. And therein lies the tragedy of these two figures. And what about the context in which this girl was born? Do you remember those details, Amini? What's the backdrop?
Yeah, so she doesn't really know the exact age. So she says the time when there was a flood, that is the time. That's the time I remember she was born. So she must be some 10 years old or no, some 3 years old.
Yeah.
And that's actually very important when we read about the countryside. I think even today in countryside, quite a lot of people, who are of older generation, they don't really remember the day they were born or the date they were born. And even in the records are not actually like totally correct. They're just somewhat precise.
Yeah, you're quite right. We have similar instances. I'm talking about other stories which are not there in this set that we're talking about. For instance, the Blue Umbrella. We have we do not know the precise age of Binya. It's just an approximation to a particularly a heavy snowfalls, heavy snowstorm or something of that sort, right? So they keep time according to natural events. They become the landmarks. And even this old man Muni in Arkinarayan's astrologer's day, he keeps time according to all these famines, right? So this talks about a particular kind of society which is still very rural, still very close in communion with nature and natural incidents, and still far away from modernity. So that is communicated to us through these details. The confusion about age is a good giveaway. But the point that I want to come back to is this girl, Amani, is born during a particularly bad, hard monsoon season. There are floods. And then there's nobody to care for this pregnant woman, right? Everybody is leaving the village. That's what she says. Everybody's in a hurry to leave with their pots and pans. I was on my own. I was on the bed lying and there was nobody. I thought I was going to die. So that is an indication of the precarious nature of the family in which she is in. She's probably on her own with just this child to look after. So where's the father? What about the other family members? So all these questions keep coming up. So we see more, breakaway families in the story. Mutashi is on her own. Amu is without a mother. Father is far away in Calcutta, and he refuses to come home to the to the in-laws. And we have Amini, who just has a mother. We don't know about the father figure, who is supposed to be the provider according to the patriarchal theory that is played out in this Indian society. So if we look very closely, we can ask all these questions with regard to gender and family. So despite the fact that men are supposed to provide, men are supposed to care for, they are not able to do so due to various factors that are there in society. And what are those factors? So we need to ask all these questions. We might not always find the answers, but these questions will be very, very helpful.
Another really important I think aspect of gender that plays out in summer vacation is the conception of beauty, I believe, because there is an incident where she's discussing, where Muthassi is discussing it with the other ladies who are who have come to the household, and I believe the takeaway is that fat and fair is a conception of beauty, which is totally in contrast with what the urban India or what the modern urban India looks at. Beauty.
So it's an interesting observation, Akash. I have never thought of this in that particular way. One thing that struck me in relation to beauty was everybody is dark. all the women are dark. We don't get any references to fair-skinned women. Bharati is dark, Muttashi is dark, Ammu is dark, Amni is dark, Naniamma is dark. I mean, and different shades of darkness are there. And in fact, Muttashi's eyes are compared to the navel fruit, right? Very scary image. Imagine those two, fruits as eyes, and then on a ceramic white plate. So it's a scary image, and we have similar ghostly associations with eyes with regard to Nani Amma's daughter, right? So darkness seems to be a major color that is associated with the women. I don't know how to understand it. Perhaps the association is with the rural Kerala. I'm just speculating here. And with regard to being plump, Nani Amma Muttashi thinks that Amu is not plump enough. She's not healthy enough. She's not been cared for enough, probably because she's with her father and there's no mother figure to do all these traditional jobs of looking after, feeding, nurturing the child. So that association is there. But we have a plump child there with a mother. Bharati's child is really plump, right? She calls him a rascal who has just had his feed. So again, the same gender associations that a mother will really nurture the child, a motherless girl will not be really thriving. So, but we need to think more about this, the urban notions of what is beauty and the rural notions of what is beauty. So I'm just going to leave it there because other comments that I make will be more speculative in nature.
And coming to the other stories of Kabuliwala and Karma, we can sort of see how in both of these stories the women are the characters that are seen as they're carrying all the traditions and they're still more typically Indian, if you will. While the father in Kabuliwala says he is modern and he doesn't believe in these things, and in Karma though it's
that's an interesting comparison, and I feel that the author in Karma refers to the wife of Mohanlal once as Lakshmi and then as Mistress Lal as well. So why is he using both these terms?
Okay, even I have thought of this difference in terms, applied to this particular female character. Sometimes it's Lady Lal, it's almost ironically done. She's not a lady in the English sense, right? So. There's a lot of irony there. She's, as you mentioned, fat and fair. And here I want to pick up on your earlier notion about fatness and being fair, because she is not like the Piccadilly prostitutes who are most probably very slim, very attractive and very fair. She is more earthy in that sense, very fat, and she doesn't care about her appearance, right? She wears a really crumpled sari, dirty sari with a red border. She doesn't care about her appearance. She belches and she eats pan. So she is not in any sense like a upper class English lady. So that contrast is brought about, and she seems to be symbolizing the rest of these assorted crowd of Indians who do not care too much about how they appear to the rest. And she also talks quite a lot with her inferiors, right? She's very chatty too, and again that's very unladylike, isn't it? So again, that division is really made, the Indianness of Lakshmi and the non-Indianness of Sir Mohan Lal.
And I think just like you said that Lady Lal is used ironically, I think naming the character Lakshmi is also very ironic, because Lakshmi is supposed to be the goddess of wealth.
Quite right. And she it's a very interesting name, and the goddess association somehow grants her some kind of sacredness of soul. She seems to kind of, at the end of the story, dole out justice in some way, poetic justice, or rough justice when she spits on her husband, right? So there we can again connect it to the associations with divinity there. And again, Lakshmi, what was the question again?
So the name Lakshmi is also ironic in a way, because
the goddess of wealth,
it's the goddess of wealth, and she's not treated fairly by her husband.
Okay, so I'll go back to that point. She lives in a bungalow, obviously, and she occupies the upper story, and he's on the ground floor. There's hardly any relationship between the two. The barest of the bonds are maintained. But the funny thing is, she's the only one in the story who offers money to the man who has helped carry the stuff onto the train. In fact, this rich barrister, the vizier, the Sir Mohanlal, doesn't seem to offer anybody any kind of money, right? So maybe again, I'm just trying to make connections to this goddess of Lakshmi thing, in the sense that she offers money to this poor guy who is in need, right? And I'm reminded again of the price of bananas, where this rich businessman, doesn't give any money to the coolie. I mean, at least the money that he's been owed by him. So it's a very interesting comparison. So I would kind of endorse that connection with the goddess in that way. Lakshmi and Sir Mohanlal is a very interesting couple, right? I have this question for you. He doesn't like her very much. He puts her in the interclass zenana. He travels first class. But the very fact that they're traveling together, it's a very, very interesting notion. What are the significances of that? Can we speculate on that?
Yes, from what I think, it also signifies the fact that she cannot live without her husband. She cannot live independently, so he has to take her wherever he goes. And it's more like she's not treated like a human person. She's treated more like some stuff, actually. And
she's
like,
that parallel her with the servants also. She
Yeah.
just has to follow the will of her master, which is her
and
husband.
it's a trope of obedient wife that actually keeps coming up in Indian literature.
Yeah. So, the opening scene is pretty interesting in that regard, because we have this man who's looking at the mirror. He's adjusting his, outfit and all, and he's talking to the mirror, and he imagines the mirror talking to him. It's a fantastic situation that way. And then he calls the bearer and asks for a glass of scotch or whiskey or something of that sort. And we have this poor woman who's sitting outside, exposed to the elements in some sense. She's just outside that first class waiting room. I mean, that difference in hierarchy couldn't be made more apparent, right? She's sitting on that steel trunk, and she's having a conversation with the coolie because the bearer has gone in to pour her husband a drink, right? And so that tells you how unprotected she is in some sense. He's not doing his job, right? That's made very, very clear. As a husband, he is supposed to care for, protect the husband, so that's not being done there. So he's kind of subverting the same patriarchal rules that applies to most of the men in Indian soil. So that's one thing. The other thing is, as you said, she's not treated as a human being. She is more or less like a property, and the word master is very interesting there. She tells the coolie, I'm traveling with my master. So master-slave relationship is something that's happening between the two of them, right? And again, the Indian setup is in such a way that in those days, they were literally the slaves, the property, right? Not like in these days with rights and, rights to property and other kinds of rights. So that's there. And I want to bring this idea of master and slave to In the Flood, where Chenan has his master. So we have the collapse of the class divisions and the gender relationships here in this terminology of master and slave. Can we talk more about that?
Yeah.
So would you like to talk about the parallels, basically the parallels that the relationship between Chennan's master and Chennan, and the parallels of that to Chennan and his dog?
Yeah, we can see that initially Chenan sort of left behind by his master, and then later you feel that you see the dog being left behind by Chenan. So, and we also have to think about whether this was done intentionally or not intentionally. But yeah, so this, you can see the parallels of the master-slave relation here, and it was done intentionally to
bring that out.
Yeah. So the important parallels are Chenan occupies the same gender position as Lakshmi in relation to the two masters, right? So we have Chenan in a very, very weak passive situation, even though he is the head of the family within his domestic space. In relation to the master, he is in a powerless situation, which is the situation of most women in the Indian context, right? So that parallel is very, very apparent there. And in fact, again, the dog, when we look at the relationship between the dog and Chenan, the dog is in a powerless and weak position. The dog can be symbolically compared to the women, the weaker sex, right? So we have similar such power parallels happening across the society and the literature. So there are nuances to various relationships that we can pick up on and discuss in great detail. Yeah.
So in this way, the author also tries to bring out the concerns of the downtrodden through the dog, and also somewhat through Chenan.
Yeah, that's true. The dog becomes a great symbol, right? It's a catch-all in some ways. The dog could represent Chenan himself. If Chenan was left behind, what would have been his status? He would most probably have been eaten by the crocodile. When the floodwaters had risen. So the dog resembles or stands for the lower caste pariah. Chenan, the dog also stands for all the powerless, all the vulnerable, all the marginalized, all the people who are in the fringes, who are supposed to be rescued, by the powerful, the rich, the wealthy, but who aren't doing anything to help them in from situations of distress. So that symbol is a very, very wide symbol, and we can apply it to. That's why we don't necessarily have to see the dog as an outcast. It stands for any and every weak, vulnerable, and it could stand for a female. It could stand for the lowest of the species. Some of the creepy crawlies. You name it. If you look at children, they would easily kind of stamp out the creepy crawlies, smaller ones at least, right? But they would really be frightened of the bigger creatures. So you can apply this across the humans and the non-living, and then the animal world too.
And we can also see this numerous instances where there are boats that are coming that could potentially rescue the dog, but then they don't rescue the dog in the end.
Yeah.
So that can also be that it's not that people cannot help, but it is just they choose not to.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a very important incident in the story, I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, so the boats appear 3 times, right? And that's very, very interesting. The hopes are built up. The first time it's really hard to see this guy coming in a rowboat, drinking this coconut water and leaving, and the dog is wagging its tail and hoping to be rescued, right? So that indifference is expressed to that gesture. You look at a creature in distress and then you are indifferent to it. You enjoy your life and pleasures and then walk away. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is they notice it very clearly. They notice it and they leave it there. Right? Again, brutal indifference. And the third time, it's callousness, because they also attack it, right? So why do they attack it? Can we talk about it?
The dog is preventing, the dog
The
is
theft,
doing
yeah.
its duty, sort of. But since it's already in a position, they just feel it's okay to abuse it further and leave.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just doing its job, and the men are supposed to help the dog and rescue it. But what they do is, since this is a weaker being, and since they think they're powerful enough to overpower this dog, they attack it. Right? So that thing is also there. The fact that you can overpower this creature because it's vulnerable makes these egoistic human beings attack the dog. So we have materialism, greed, selfishness, exploitation, all these things, themes come across in that act.
Definitely so.
Yeah, actually one of the things about in the flood is there are references to the temple being submerged up till the neck in one point of the story. Also there is chanting of the Ramayana. So we see few religious sort of symbols put up here and there in the story, which is sort of attacking, in the story in general is trying to attack the kind of oppression and the kind of things that come with the social system and the religion. So how do you see these sort of religious symbols put in the story?
Okay, yeah, you're quite right. In fact, the story begins with a deity neck deep in water. That's how the story. It's a very powerful opening, isn't it?
Yeah, that can symbolize the fact that the deity himself is helpless.
Yes, in some sense, yeah. In some interpretations, yes. You can read it that way. The other thing that we shouldn't forget is that detail where the temple becomes a refuge for so many creatures, right? For so many human beings. Actually, the numbers are given there. The precise numbers are there. These many men and these many women were there. These many cats were there. These many dogs were there. An assortment of lives are there, and the temple is a haven to the majority, but not to all, right? The deity does take care of some, a majority of humanity and living things, but not all. Some beings are left behind, right? So what do we do then? I mean, how are we supposed to act in those moments? Should we put aside our greed and materiality and act as civilized human beings and kind of rescue the things, even though you think those things are the other? The dog is an other, right? I have had students ask me this question. Perhaps these folks were scared of the dog, not many people are comfortable with dogs being close to them, so why don't we look at it that way? I mean, fair enough, but we should really also understand the context,
yes.
the situation. Read the situation. What does the dog want? Is it ready to attack you at that particular moment? Most probably no. So you need to kind of put your fears on the back seat and act like generous, benevolent, human beings in those situations, right?
Yeah.
And why do you fear the other? Because the dog here is a symbol. I mean, the dog is not a dog per se. It's a symbol for all the others who are unlike you. How do you react to the other? How do you react to a beggar? How do you react to a woman in ragged clothes? Right? So all these questions can be asked.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, and I think now it has a lot of parallels to society as well. As we should question of,
Yeah.
what how it's a natural reaction. I mean,
Yes.
not a natural, but it's a reaction that people generally have
Mhm.
towards things that they're not familiar
Absolutely,
with others.
absolutely. If you stand, if you're stuck in traffic and you're in a car, you see beggars coming and knocking on the car windows and asking for money. Some people can't even bear the sight, so they just turn their faces away. It's a natural, within quotes, reaction. But how do you deal with the reaction, and how do you kind of deal with the situation? How do you deal with the other? So these questions need to be asked. Of course, there's no simple answer to that question, but we need to ask these questions.
So I think, ma'am, that this phenomena of othering
Mm-hmm.
also brings us to this question of identity,
Yes.
which is very relevant in the context of these four stories, and especially in karma, because it's about him
Yeah.
not being grounded in his roots.
Yes. Quite right. He says that my 5 years in Britain was better than those 40 odd years that I spent in India, right? He's stuck in that particular period, right? He draws his identity from those brief years that he spent in England, in Britain. How do we understand that? He's completely dissatisfied with his life in home, right, on his homeland, and he is caught between these two identities, and he is on the side of the colonizers against the colonized. So it's a very, very difficult situation from which we need to understand his identity. Why is he dissatisfied? All these questions need to be asked. Why is he dissatisfied in his own homeland? What makes him happy there? Is it real happiness? Does he draw real sustenance, spiritual sustenance from Britain? What kind of sustenance does he draw? And if you look at those details, there's so many details that comes up, and the details that he's fascinated by, the spires of this Oxford University, the gowns, the grey gowns, the Piccadilly prostitutes, the dinners, the games, all these are superficial. Do you want to talk about that in some sense?
Yeah, definitely so.
Yeah, so they're all, you can see how he has a very superficial view, as you said, of the life in England, also a very classist view, because it's not the normal life of every person in England. It's the life of a selected upper class in England, which he thinks of as the most ideal, and he despises his own country, and he even what he does, he thinks if he dresses up and if he wears the clothes of an Englishman, those are the ways to be English to him. It's very superficial enjoyments and very superficial things that he picks
I
up.
think that's also connected to how Mohanlal perceives himself as compared to how others might perceive Mohanlal. Just like those two soldiers there, who somewhat are clueless about who he actually is,
Yeah.
but then they
See his skin
Yeah.
color, and then they
Yeah.
pin him down to his race, and
Yeah. So to connect these ideas that you have just expressed, so there is superficiality, and that superficiality is associated with the upper classes, the nobility, the landed gentry, right, who go to Oxford, enjoy all these dinners and all these material pleasures. He doesn't learn how to lead a life. How should one conduct one's life? All these questions are not learnt during his 5-year period of stay in Britain. Instead, what he picks up is the Times and the Scotch and the English cigarettes, which he proudly displays to get the attention of these English folks so that he could go back through them, use them as some kind of channel medium so that he could, imagine those vast vistas of England, the dreamy spires of Oxford, things like that. So, it's a very, very false world with which he's in love, and that is dashed obviously by these working class soldiers who are not obviously from the nobility. They don't speak the Queen's English. They don't have the Oxford accent. They're drunk. Mohanlal drinks, but he doesn't get drunk. He just, partakes in a little bit of drink just before he boards the train. And so there is a vast difference between these classes. He apes the high class, and he's attacked by these figures, the subalterns in some sense, even within the British domestic context, the subalterns who throw him out. So he really doesn't understand the realities of life, realities neither of British life or of Indian life.
Yes.
So he's somehow lost in that chasm between the two.
So that also brings us to this takeaway. I believe if we sum it up in a sentence, it would be that however much one tries to shrug off their identity, that they have not chosen themselves, but is associated because of their birth. It doesn't really go off. For better or for worse, it doesn't.
So and that identity, is a problematic identity for Mohanlal. He doesn't want to adhere to that identity because that's a weaker identity. Being a colonized is not a admirable recognition for his psyche, which is why he wants to be on the other side, which is oppressing, right, the locals, the indigenous population. So he doesn't like that weak position. So that's something we need to understand. So this identity is seen as weak, and in fact the two soldiers club everybody together as niggers. For them everybody is the same. Asians or Africans, black Africans, whomever they are, they're all the same.
Non-white.
Non-whites, they all clump together, and regardless of the fact that they are well-read, literate, intellectuals, they don't care. You just go with the white and the black, and the black is inferior, so stamp them out. So and the Times and all his baggage, everything is thrown out, and I don't know how to see that. I mean, of course, he's condemnable because he shirks off his own homeland, in order to oppress symbolically the locals. But at the end of the day, he's been attacked. That's a racist attack.
I also wanted to talk about, this is one point where there are two, so basically he sees the English soldiers. He decides that he's going to talk to the conductor if there's any problem. So he perceives himself to be in a superior position, perhaps because of his class, or he's been knighted because of these things. But in the end it shows the race is still colonial India, and it's still a system of
the realities of life in that temporal context come up.
The brute power of these English soldiers ultimately wins, in that battle of context. Your Times reading capacity is not helping you at that moment. He's shouting for the guard, and he's not heard by the guard who's at the end of the compartment next to his wife, right? The Zenana and the guard's compartment are next to each other at the tail end, so they are miles apart, literally and symbolically, and he doesn't get the help that he really needs. So this is a really complex tale where there are complexities in the sense of colonial rule, the identities of the weak and the powerful, working classes and the upper classes, and all these are kind of intermeshed here in the story, intermingled. And it somehow becomes at the end of the day, it becomes difficult to really be happy about his state, because we are always reminded of that great example of Gandhi being thrown out of the train when he was traveling in the first class compartment, right? So we need to condemn the racial attack. At the same time, we need to also see that he's acting in a less admirable way in the way he treats his fellow human beings, fellow Indians.
So you could see it as both a tragedy as well as a comic.
Yes, it has the tragic comic overtones at the end of the day.
Definitely so.
Yeah. So how about Kabuliwala? I think we should talk more about the Kabuliwala in relation to gender as well as the idea of identity, right?
So when coming to identity, how do you think the foreign origin of Kabuliwala plays a role in the story?
The thing is, there has been a tradition of these migrants, temporary migrants coming to, Calcutta to sell their wares, to sell their stuff, and then they go back. They're seasonal migrants, so they're not aberrations on the horizon of Calcutta, even in the 19th century. It's quite common. So, which is why the term is pretty easy for Minnie to kind of voice out, oh, Kabuliwala, she must have heard it somewhere, called out in the streets of Calcutta. So that's not an aberration, I would think, but nevertheless, from the point of view of the mother, the really timid mother, he's a stranger, he's an other, he's a foreigner, and they have
strong suspicion.
Yes, she is very, very suspicious of this outsider figure, and there are so many outsiders in her eyes, right, ranging from snakes to the European soldiers, right? There's a range of threats for her, and it's very interesting that the European soldiers are also tagged on to that list, bringing to us this memory that these people are there, at the margins, threatening the locals, harassing the locals. So we need to keep that in mind too. But the more important thing is the relationship between the father and the daughter. How we need to read that a bit more closely, because it's not a very, very non-problematic relationship. It's a problematic relationship again. Can we talk more about the relationship?
Yes, sure.
between
What actually struck me was this parallel that at the end of the story they draw between the father, Minnie and Minnie's father, their relationship, and the Kabuliwala and his daughter who would have grown up by now and who he hasn't seen her in so many years.
Yeah.
So that parallel is very striking, I believe.
Yes, it is. And the most touching moment in the story is the imprint of the hand, right? It's not a photograph, it's not a portrait, it's not a painting, it's just a charcoal imprint, isn't it, of a hand, and that's close to his heart, and that gives us the sense of a child's hand touching the heart of the father, and that brings in the really emotional bonds between fathers and daughters, and okay, that's very touching and poignant and all that, but there are other sides to this relationship. Maybe we should talk about it.
Yeah, so we see in the beginning of the story, Minnie and her father seem to be very close. He says, I apart from the Kabuliwala, I'm the only one who's there to listen to the stories, unlike the mother. But towards the end, the father says, I've not spoken to Minnie. Like, he's not even had proper conversations with Minnie in many years. She's more shy. She's not like the talkative boy she was before. So, yeah, we can see there's a strain in the relationship.
So I think that has a lot to do with the societal conditioning of girls. And especially in that era, that once they start growing up, they are taught to be, more girl-like somehow. And more reserved,
Yeah, despite the fact that father claims to himself to be, very modern and not concerned with these things, we can still see that ultimately Winnie does turn out to be that typical.
Yeah, yeah, and that's very interesting because at the beginning, as you guys mentioned, that she has a very very close bond with the father, and it's physically, spatially made clear. She sits at the feet of the father while he's working at the desk, right? While he's writing novels or stories, and he says, "Go away, I have some work to do." But she does the opposite. She doesn't go away. She sticks to the father, right? Until the Kabuliwala arrives, until this exotic stranger with raisins and other dried fruits to offer her. So she has a very close relationship at the cost of her relationship with her mother. And the very very interesting thing, at least to me, is the absence of small companions for her. She grows up with all these adults, right? The sentry, all these servants, she finds fault with the way how they pronounce certain words. She is with the grown-ups most of the time, and that tells us that she is growing up in a very very protected environment, and he's a modern Bengali, which means he's not going to tell his daughter about the in-laws and what would happen to her when she grows up, all these stuff. So they are cocooning her in some sense. And he's almost possessive. The father is almost possessive in some sense, as you said, I'm the only listener I'm the only person who listens to her stories, and the Kabliwala is the only other person who has a good relationship. And then once she starts to kind of move away and start making relationships with girls of her age, the father almost says that she's betrayed all her older friends, all the older male friends. So he's almost accusing her, but it's no fault of hers because of the gender stereotypes with which she grows up, right? We have a very very traditional mother, very very traditional mother. I'm sure all the women in her household would also have similar opinions. So of course she has to kind of follow
Conform.
the rules and regulations laid out by the women folk, who have greater authority and control over her. So though the relationships are admirable, the relationship between Kabiliwala and his own daughter back in Afghanistan, and the relationship between the author and Minnie, we see that these relationships are forged at the cost of other relationships, and that makes us wonder why. What facet of patriarchy comes to the surface in the figure of all these modern fathers who adore their daughters. Adoring the daughters is not the norm in society. Adoring the sons is the norm, right? So sons are preferred, sons are mollycoddled, sons are spoiled to death. But these figures, for the first time in the 19th century, these fathers love their daughters. They miss their daughters. They carry the etched handprints of their daughters around. That's very remarkable. That's very striking. But it's still not admirable, because in my reading, we see different kinds of patriarchy coming up to the surface to kind of once again, hold the daughters close to their chest and not leave them to lead their own lives, find their own pursuits and pleasures and productive lives.
And also I think it's also at the cost of basically branding the mother as backward.
Absolutely. I totally agree. We did talk about it. In fact, the Kabliwala's wife is never mentioned, not even once. And again, we have a dysfunctional family here, because the little girl asks, "Father, who's mom to you?" And he thinks in his mind, "Sister-in-law," but he doesn't spell it out. So again, we have this question: perhaps she's not the biological mother who's there in the story, and perhaps is that the reason that she's being very, very rigid, strict, disciplinarian towards this particular? All these questions come up, right? So why have a dysfunctional family? That why not have a completely happy family at the heart of the story, and still have this outsider figure come in? Why not have that? Why is the father securing the daughter to his own heart? So these questions can be asked in relation to this particular story. Yeah. So patriarchy has different forms and faces, and we need to be very very careful in spotting all these. So other issues of economic deprivation, can we talk about? So
Yeah,
that
ma'am,
we
definitely. So like Minnie's family
Mm-hmm.
and Kabuliwala.
Mm-hmm.
the class difference and the difference in the economic status.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? And
Yeah.
especially Minnie's father giving him money and then
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. He's an aristocrat. The writer father is an aristocrat, and he is living in really comfortable circumstances. He doesn't seem to be doing any kind of job in the modern sense of the word. Perhaps he's a landed gentry. He lives off his land, off the rents that he gets from the land. However, Kabuliwala is in straitened circumstances. He has to collect the money for the wares that he sold if he has to go back even to his homeland. So he lives in tight circumstances money wise. And then once he has been put in jail, and even the reasons for being in jail is very interesting because it's money, which is at the heart of the crisis there, because one, creditor refuses to give him the money back, right? The person who got a shawl from him. So money does cause trouble. Ultimately, if you just unpack everything, it will lead you to this issue of money and who has it and who doesn't have it. Okay, so that's one thing. And then at the end of the story, this father gives him some money so that he can go back and forge relations with his daughter, and that will symbolically have a good effect, and a benediction on his own relationship with his daughter who's going to leave the parental home. So even that money is given with that selfish idea in mind, that somehow he will get the benefits spiritually speaking. So money and patriarchy, father-daughter relationships go hand in hand here in some sense. And in fact, the Kabuliwala doesn't want to get money for the fruits that he sells her, right? The dried fruits that he sells her, because Minnie becomes a surrogate daughter for him.
Yeah. You can also highlight how vulnerable Kabuliwala is, because of, again, his status as a foreigner or whatever it is, because he doesn't have any way to redress or any way to contact. He's just put in jail. His family's not, we don't know if his family's been informed. Nobody's been informed. He just doesn't have any contact with anybody.
Absolutely.
Redressal mechanism, nothing of that sort.
Yeah, everybody forgets about him. That's what the father says. We all forgot about him while we were busy with our own routines, right? So, and in fact, life just goes on, and this person who's supposed to roam the lands as a nomadic trader, he's from Afghanistan. So the fact that this traveler is caged is again very, very pathetic, because it contrasts his freedom with his present incarceration, isn't it? So I think we have covered many of the thematic trajectories over these 4 texts. Akash, if you have any leftovers?
I think there's one thing that I would like to cover. And that theme has not been covered in all the 4 stories, but I think it's a very, very important theme in summer vacation, and that's the theme of death, actually.
Yes.
So basically, in one instance, Amu asks that, when will you die, Muthassi? And death is considered a taboo in our society, and I think Kamala Das has used this character Amu really well, because she's a child and she doesn't know about the world that well, so she can put up this question, but this question could not have been put forward by any other character.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, summer vacation is littered with references to death, right? So many of Mutashi's companions have died before her. Amu's mother, all her other relatives. So she is like that single lone Nyawal tree which is still there. Even though death is very, very predominant, and it's almost an obsession to Amu, because she's worried that she will also lose this mother figure, Mutashi, and then she will be completely motherless, and that's a very, very scary prospect with all these men around for her. So that's why she keeps constantly asking that question, and she needs reassuring both by Mutashi and by her father that she will not die. But there is also further symbolic connections between Mutashi and other things, and that is what I think is what she represents. Mutashi is representative of a particular kind of lifestyle, a particular way of life itself. She somehow represents tradition in itself, right? Which is why the tree is always there. it's not gone away. Nobody has cut it down, and it almost begs the people around it not to cut it down. So it still wants to be around. So all these traditional values and the system still wants to be around, and Muttashi represents that, which is perhaps why. Even in the final stages of this particular story, when this little girl once again asks the father, will Mutashi be around the next year when we come for the summer vacation? And he assures her, don't worry, she will be there. And the wheels of the train seem to churn. Mutashi will be alive, and things like that. So this engine of modernity, this wheel, which symbolizes change, in fact seems to make a contrary assurance that this woman will be there. Don't worry, the past is going to be around. Even though we are progressing into the future, even though this child is moving away to Calcutta, to this modern center to grow up, she'll always come back to this past, and that past is somehow guarded by this figure of Muttashi. Right? So there are symbolic resonances to the idea of death.
In another story, which death is there, is in the flood.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see in the end, the dog, after the dog dies, you see Chenan come to see the dog, and he thinks, okay, this is probably a dog, but we don't know what are his emotions at that point.
Yes.
We don't, that's not revealed. And we have to wonder, like, what does anybody miss the dog, or is the dog's life worth, who's going to mourn it, or things like that.
Absolutely. The thoughts, as she mentioned just now, the thoughts of Chenan is not revealed to us by the narrator. It's been deliberately suppressed, and we can feel that absence towards the end of the story, and it's very, very strange. I think I've mentioned it in my lectures as well. He just uses his toes to kind of flip the dog over in order to have a good look, right? And that action is very jarring if you compare that context, that set of circumstances, when the dog is being gently rocked by the eddies, the shallow waters. It's as if the nature is somehow cradling this dead being, and we have this human being using his foot in an irreverent manner to check whether it's his dog. And in fact, we know that this dog fought with its life in order to protect the property of the master, right? So we have lots of contrasting actions and behaviors, and it's difficult to even find fault with Chenan, because we don't know what exactly his anticipations, his desires, his longings, his self-questionings, his doubts, and so on and so forth. So all we know are certain glimpses into the worlds that we have been presented through these stories, and we speculate, make reasonable assumptions, we criticize, find fault with, we come up with our own theories, but ultimately these discussions are really very helpful to make sense of life itself, which is very complicated. Yeah. So are we all done in terms of the thematic forays?
Yeah.
Thank you, audience, for watching this video. I hope you had a productive time listening to our conversation. Thank you.